I hope that now the slides are better visible, at least. So let me just prove that. And hopefully now, okay. So hopefully now from here it looks better. We hope that now for all the virtual participants, also the slides are clearer. So I suggest we take it from here and hope. But do the participants virtually hear anything? And yes, okay. So we hope that now it's better. And okay, let's give it another try. Sorry for all these issues.
Okay, thank you. So I was talking about the three scenarios that we have on hand. The first one is that the REX trade divisions or departments can become subsecretariats of the CFTA secretariat. That is the first scenario. The second one is that the REX trade divisions or departments can have their role centered in coordinating CFTA activities in their respective region. And the third one is that the REX can be integrated into the CFTA. So those are the three scenarios that we have. So I was saying that among these three scenarios, some may be a bit sensitive, but nothing has yet been decided. But these are just scenarios that maybe you can discuss on the pros and cons of each and every one, or each of the three. Okay, I was saying that in the publication of the interface between the CFTA and the REX, the following findings were the following. The key findings and policy recommendations that were drawn from the report are the following. Okay, good. So the first one is the understanding and interpretation of the REX as building blocks of the CFTA, so of the Africa Economic Community and implications of the CFTA and REX interface. The second one is that there is a need to build an interface between the CFTA and the REX free trade areas. And the third one is the understanding of the relationship between the REX and the CFTA and the Africa Economic Community. The fourth one is the need to manage the REX and the REX free trade areas as well as the CFTA interface. Okay. Of course, we are now talking about the relationship between the CFTA and the REX, but we have come up with recommendations for African Union, the African Union Commission, the African Commission, the REX, the CFTA Secretariat, and as well as member states. But now let's begin with the recommendations to the African Union. So the African Union Commission is recommended to assess and evaluate the Abuja Treaty. I'm sure that most of you have heard of the Abuja Treaty. The African Union Commission is also recommended to develop interpretative notes for text clarifying how they relate to and grant to the CFTA agreement. The African Union Commission is also requested to help the regional economic community to fulfill their roles as building blocks through the capacity building. Because we know that capacity building is very important. The African Union Commission is also requested to initiate and conduct trade defense investigations, as well as develop a cooperation framework and agree on a division of responsibilities in the implementation of the CFTA. With regard to the CFTA Secretariat, the CFTA Secretariat is request to operationalize the REX task force to support the CFTA and all warning systems, conduct studies of approximate modalities and mechanism of managing the interface, develop a roadmap for the RECs as they define their activities and objectives, as well as priorities for the cooperating on implementation of the CFTA, develop a standalone mechanism for the CFTA strategies to eliminate NTBs, non-tariff barriers, coordinate efforts on liberalizing trade in services by harmonizing schedules of commitments and establishing appropriate regulatory frameworks, develop a monitoring and evaluation system that will help measure the CFTA implementation. The CFTA Secretariat is also requested to develop a standard operating procedures for border agency cooperation throughout the continent. It is also requested to create a platform to identify and map stakeholders at national and regional levels. So now with regard to the RECs are requested to integrate the Abuja Treaty into their legal instruments, work programs, treaties, as well as instruments. They're also requested to use their platforms to facilitate and expedite member states' domestication of CFTA provisions. They are also requested to develop regional schedules of specific commitments for trade in services, regulatory frameworks. They are also requested to develop regional implementation strategies by consolidating national CFTA implementation strategies with the technical support of the CFTA Secretariat and different partners. There is also need to develop memoranda of understanding on rollback and standstill commitments on eliminating non-tariff barriers for different member states and monitor and oversee the CFTA mechanism for eliminating non-tariff barriers. So this is just a summary of the report. So this is just a summary of the report, but for those who are interested to read the whole report, I've shared the link for where you can find the whole report, or in case you have many questions, you can contact us for feedback. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vital. And again, sorry to all of you for the technical issues that we're facing, both here in Nairobi and then also for the participants joining us virtually. We hope that despite all these issues, you were able to follow the presentation to a certain extent at least. And as Vital was saying, you can find the whole report on the UNECA website. I assume we might also be able to share the slides that have been presented, so that at least also those that have not been able to understand everything from the presentation can hopefully do so afterwards. Now, following this first input, there were a lot of recommendations for all the different levels. So that is the RECs themselves, the AfCFTA Secretariat, and the AU Commissioner. And luckily, as Danielle was explaining in the beginning, we have participants and representatives from all these different levels. So now we will go into the first sub-panel and actually take up some of these recommendations and see what the representatives from the different RECs and continental institutions think about them. As Vital was saying, some of them might be a bit sensitive, so we hope that it's also possible to just talk about where these processes stand and what the positions of the different actors are. So in order to do that, let's welcome the panelists, some of which are joining us virtually and some also in person.
So our first speaker or first panelist really is Cesar Charles Chimuya. I hope I pronounce all the names correctly. He's the acting director of the Department of Economic Development, Trade Industry and Mining at the AU Commission. He's joining us virtually, so please turn on your video so we can all see you. I'll already proceed introducing the next panelist, Hamadou Karidio, head of AfCFTA Liaison Office at the AfCFTA Secretariat, also joining us virtually. Please also turn on your video so we can see you. Great.
Perfect. We can see Mr. Caridio. We can't see Charles yet. Charles, in case you hear us and the video works. Oh, perfect. I think now it's coming.
Great. And then here in the room, we have Dr. Christopher Onyango, the Director of Trade and the Customs Division at COMESA Secretariat. Please join us here in the front. And also virtually, we have Mr. Alfred Ndabeni, Senior Program Officer Trade in the Directorate of Industry Development and Trade at the SADC Secretariat. Please, oh, you already have your video on. Great. Welcome to everyone for this first panel session.
Okay, great. So thank you very much to all four of you for joining us. So we hope that you heard Vital's presentation, at least to some extent, that you were able to follow. Maybe in case you haven't, I mean, some of you might know the report anyway and have been maybe part of the process. So I would actually start with you, Charles, in the AU Commission in Addis. Could you maybe give us a brief just overview and background about the process of the division of labor, the separation between the AU Commission, the AfCFTA Secretariat, which, as most of you know, has been established like 2 years ago as an own standing organ within the AU, and the regional economic community. So what is the role of the AU Commission in that process? And where do you see that process actually heading in terms of the division of labor and the relationship between these different organs?
Thank you so much, Xavier and colleagues. Unfortunately, we couldn't get her name because we had serious audio issues at the beginning of the session. Now it's good that the audio has improved and at least we are able to follow. Unfortunately, again, we just followed half of the presentation because of the same challenges that we had. But all the same, we believe that we will be able to interact with the conference right there in Nairobi. Yes, as I think I do not need to introduce the genesis of where the AfCFTA is, but just to say that all this is anchored in Article 6 of Abuja Treaty that was signed by heads of states and governments in Africa in 1991. So what I can say is that after the process of negotiations were done and the AfCFTA came into force, it became necessary again to establish the African Continental Free Trade Area Secretariat that is now, as we all know, headquartered in Accra, Ghana. Now, the major function of the AfCFTA Secretariat is to implement the agreement itself. While this was a vision that is an FTA, that is a vision to take Africa into the next stages of the Abuja Treaty. As you know, Article 6 talks about the 6 stages. So the AfCFTA agreement is a vision that it will take the continent through the next stages, form as a foundation for taking the continent into the next stages of the treaty. Now, in terms of the way forward, when the AfCFTA was established, at the African Union Commission, we began a process of what I would say, coming up with a framework of collaboration between the AfCFTA and the regional economic communities. This was on the background that the regional economic communities, according to the same article I referred to in Abuja Treaty, are the building blocks for the Africa Economic Community. That should not be disputed, because even the negotiations of the AfCFTA agreement itself was based on what was obtaining in the RECs. So that framework of agreement, the discussion was started, but when now the AF Secretariat was fully operational, the task was now moved to the Secretariat to continue with that framework of agreement. In parallel, again, at the African Union Commission, there was a whole, process under the division of labor. This was ordered by the heads of states and government from 2019, and it's a process that is still ongoing. That division of labor speaks again to what all the competent arms of the commission, especially organs, including the commission itself, then the RECs, and then the other organs like NEPA, AUDA, NEPAD, as well as the AfCFTA Secretariat, to say what will be their competence. So that process, first of all, started to look at issues of economic competence, issues like trade and finance. Then it is gonna move on issues of politics and the like. So basically, that framework is not yet finalized. It's not yet finalized, but it's still ongoing, trying to make sure that there is that clear division of labor. So, but going forward, personally, I believe that there are some things that the RECs can still do while waiting for finalization of these processes, so that they still contribute to the process of implementation of the AfCFTA. Among, I think, some of the issues that they can do is to help their own member states right now to come up with the AfCFTA implementation strategies. Some countries have come up with the strategies already, some have not. So I think that's one area that the RECs can take up and do. The second area, I think, is the sensitization, especially among the stakeholders and especially the private sector in their own regions. I think the RECs can champion that work, of course, in liaison with the AfCFTA Secretariat. I think I would want to stop there for now. I'm glad that my colleague from the AfCFTA Secretariat is here. He will be able to inform the meeting about other developments that are going on in that regard. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Charles, for this overview, and also for keeping your intervention rather short, given that we had to start a bit later. That's much appreciated. So as Charles was saying, we would now give over to Mr. Hamadou Karidio from the AfCFTA Secretariat, who's actually the liaison officer of the AfCFTA Secretariat in Addis Ababa. And I would ask Mr. Karidio to maybe something seems to be happening in the meeting again. So Charles was mentioning the framework that is being negotiated and developed between the AU Commission, the AfCFTA Secretariat, and the RECs. And I would be interested to hear from Mr. Karidio a bit more about this process, where it stands, where the development of the framework between AfCFTA, AU Commission and RECs is currently, and what the role of the AfCFTA Secretariat is in that process. And Mr. Karidio will give his remarks in French, and so in order to actually invite him for his intervention, maybe Danielle will briefly actually repeat the question in French.
Oui, monsieur, pouvez-vous décrire la structure de coopération entre la Commission de l'Union africaine et la SLEFCA et les communautés économiques régionales, et aussi quel est le rôle de la SLEFCA dans cette coopération?
Merci, madame. Je voudrais sincèrement vous remercier. Xavier, vous qui nous avez invités. Salutations donc à la GIZ pour avoir organisé cette rencontre. Chers collègues, recevez les salutations du secrétariat de la ZLECAf. Vraiment, nous apprécions à la juste valeur vraiment la pertinence de ce thème. Ceci étant dit, je voudrais saluer mon frère Charles qui vient d'intervenir et surtout la présentation aussi de la CEA. Merci pour la pertinence des recommandations, mais nous aurions souhaité avoir l'étude ou bien que dans les échanges que nous avons eus par mail, qu'on nous fasse référence de cette étude. Ceci étant dit, je reviens sur le thème, à savoir si réellement les règles continueront à être des blocs pour nous, si c'est un slogan ou juste un truc de mode. Je voudrais dire que le lien qui s'établit entre le secrétariat de la ZLECAf, donc CFTA et les REC, ces liens-là prennent naissance dans le processus même de négociation avant même l'accord. Parce que vous le savez que dans le cadre du processus de négociation, on avait créé la task force. Et la task force reposait essentiellement, en tout cas, sur la contribution des communautés économiques régionales. Et c'est pourquoi même le préambule de l'accord dit que ces REC, ces communautés économiques régionales, servent de pilier à la création de la ZLECAf. Donc, lorsque la ZLECAf est arrivée, elle avait trouvé déjà une fondation sur laquelle elle repose. Et mieux, cela a été aussi gardé dans les principes. L'article 5 de l'accord le dit clairement, les principes que les zones économiques, les zones de libre-échange des communautés économiques régionales sont les piliers de la ZLECAf. Et plus loin même au niveau de l'article 19 de l'accord, et là où on parle pour éviter les conflits et les incompatibilités, donc l'alinéa 2 dit les États parties qui sont membres d'autres communautés économiques régionales, d'autres accords commerciaux régionaux et d'autres unions douanières et qui ont atteint entre eux des niveaux d'intégration régionale plus élevés que ceux prévus par l'accord de la ZLECAf maintiennent ces niveaux d'intégration. Vous voyez, donc l'avènement de la ZLECAf veut d'abord préserver les constructions d'intégration qui se sont passées au niveau des régions. Donc, et nous, on le dit, vous ne pouvez pas couper la branche, vous ne pouvez pas scier la branche sur laquelle vous êtes assis. Nous sommes assis sur les REC, les communautés économiques régionales. Ce qui est à notre avantage, c'est de continuer à préserver et à faire en sorte qu'elles deviennent plus dynamiques, plus opérationnelles, plus fortes. C'est sur cette force que reposera la ZLECAf et si elle veut atteindre ses objectifs. On peut même faire un parallélisme, peut-être donner un exemple, même si ce n'est pas total, un exemple partiel de la région dont je viens, l'Afrique de l'Ouest. Vous savez qu'il y a la CEDEAO et il y a l'UMOA. Malgré l'UMOA était en avant, je veux dire, c'était la première communauté économique d'intégration en Afrique de l'Ouest, mais qui regroupait seulement 8 pays des 15 pays de l'Afrique de l'Ouest. L'avènement de la CEDEAO n'a pas fait disparaître l'UMOA et surtout, je pense que les meilleures pratiques qui se sont développées dans le cadre de l'UMOA, l'ECOWAS et la CEDEAO les a intégrées pour quand même parfaire et aller sur la voie. Et la preuve en est que en 2000, on avait un tarif extérieur commun UMOA, lorsqu'en 2015, on avait eu le tarif extérieur commun de la CEDEAO. Ça a éliminé d'office, ça a fait disparaître le texte extérieur commun de l'UMOA. Et on s'est retrouvé, au lieu d'avoir plusieurs régimes commerciaux, on s'est retrouvé avec un seul régime commercial en Afrique de l'Ouest par rapport à cette question. Et je pense que c'est ça aussi l'évolution de la ZLECA. Au fur et à mesure que la ZLECA évolue pour des normes d'intégration plus élevées, les secrétariats et la multiplicité des régimes commerciaux ou la diversité des régimes commerciaux que nous avons sur le continent vont laisser place à l'unique régime commercial qui est issu de la ZLECAf. Mais cela se fera avec les communautés économiques régionales parce que ces communautés économiques régionales aussi ont, par leur dynamisme, elles ne seront pas statiques, par leur dynamisme, elles connaîtront d'autres domaines de compétences. Donc, nous pensons ouvertement que la ZLECAf, c'est une réponse à la multiplicité des régimes commerciaux qui sévissent en Afrique et aussi au chevauchement parce que nous avons constaté une appartenance multiple de certains pays à plusieurs communautés économiques régionales. Lorsque nous aurons le seul régime commercial comme la ZLECAf, je pense que le problème de chevauchement trouvait aussi sa solution. Et sur le plan, donc je parlais en termes de collaboration. Vous savez, comme cela a été déjà dans les recommandations de certains rapports du champion au niveau des sommets des chefs d'État et de gouvernement, dès l'installation du secrétariat, la collaboration avec les REC a été donc une des priorités. Et en septembre 2021, il a été organisé la première réunion de coordination pour la mise en œuvre de la ZLECAf avec les communautés économiques régionales et la participation du secteur privé. Et donc, et les principales recommandations qui étaient issues de cette rencontre, c'était de créer un groupe de travail continental élargi. Donc, la task force qu'il y avait, d'élargir ça en faisant intervenir le secrétariat de la ZLECAf, les secrétariats ou les commissions des communautés économiques régionales, les conseils des entreprises et les partenaires stratégiques. Donc, c'était la première recommandation. On a eu une autre recommandation qui avait demandé l'élaboration de thèmes de référence pour inclure les mandats tels que la collaboration avec le secrétariat de la ZLECAf dans le processus de négociation, de mise en œuvre et d'évaluation, de suivi et d'évaluation de la ZLECAf. Parce que vous savez que la ZLECAf, quand même, on a une clause de rendez-vous pour l'évaluer, pour faire des ajustements. Donc, on a aussi élaboré des thèmes de référence par rapport à ça. On avait aussi dit d'établir un cadre de dialogue consultatif et tirer les leçons des modèles similaires réussis au niveau de certaines communautés économiques régionales. Donc, nous n'allons pas chercher les exemples ailleurs. Les exemples sont apportés de main à travers les communautés économiques régionales. C'est ça qui constitue nos références. Il y a aussi, on a envisagé la participation des communautés économiques régionales, en particulier les unions douanières qui ne sont pas reconnues officiellement par l'Union africaine, à savoir par exemple l'Union douanière la SACU, par exemple, vous avez l'UEMOA, vous avez en Afrique de l'Ouest, vous avez la CEMAC en Afrique centrale. Parce que si on regarde les résultats en termes d'intégration de ces communautés économiques régionales qui ne sont pas reconnues par l'Union africaine, en termes d'intégration, leur intégration, on peut l'apprécier, est assez plus profonde que même les intégrations que nous avons dans certaines communautés économiques régionales officiellement reconnues. Donc, elles peuvent nous servir d'exemple de meilleures pratiques et créer ce que nous voulons comme une sorte de mutualisation, hein, et de la création d'une synergie pour qu'au fond, l'essentiel, c'est d'atteindre les objectifs qui sont là. Booster le commerce intra-africain, permettre une industrialisation, permettre l'émergence de chaînes de valeur, ainsi de suite, pour qu'au fond, l'Afrique, vis-à-vis en interne, que ce soit en externe, son commerce vraiment acquiert des lettres de noblesse. Et vous savez aussi que, je voulais dire que toujours dans cet élan, nous allons tenir le 4, à partir du 4 juin prochain, la deuxième réunion de coordination avec les REC à Arusha. Et nous allons tenir ce... Et je veux conclure, madame, pour nous autres, vraiment, les REC demeureront les piliers. Et les REC plus fortes, plus dynamiques, plus opérationnelles, contribueront certainement à l'atteinte des objectifs de la ZLECA. Donc, je voudrais m'arrêter là-bas. Merci pour le privilège qui m'a été accordé et merci beaucoup. Bonne suite pour les travaux.
Merci, monsieur, pour la réponse. And without losing any more time, I will sort of approach our next panelist, Dr. Onyango from COMESA. And I think in COMESA, you're quite familiar with overlaps. I mean, all the members of COMESA are also, or most of them, are also members of either the EAC or the SADC. So I think you're quite familiar with this concept. So what does that mean if now an additional layer is added with the AfCFTA? What does that mean for COMESA?
Thank you very much. Let me start by appreciating the invitation by GIZ to this meeting. We value it because especially the topics of discussion which are very quite relevant at the moment. And also want to appreciate, can you hear me now? Appreciate the previous speakers, starting with the presenter of the main document, Vito, for the very good presentation, as well as the previous discussants. Although I must admit I didn't get anything in French, so you will excuse me if I repeat some of the comments that my colleague did present, but I could from far get a feeling that that was a nice presentation. So I think without being repetitive and not forgetting what you have just asked about the complexity, I would rather, let me start by saying that I know Vito also mentioned it, the topic, a complicated relationship. I would rather tone it down a bit and say a complex, not necessarily complicated, but a complex because of the multiplicity issues. But my colleague has spoke so eloquently about the legal framework, you know, for integration in Africa, as laid down within the Abuja Treaty, the 6 stages. The 6th one, which seeks to consolidate the African market into a common market, and I think so far there is a lot of efforts and positive progress that is taking place, including what we are now discussing as far as realization of those dreams are concerned. And perhaps just beyond the Abuja Treaty, within the AfCFTA agreement itself, Article 5 talks about recognition of RECs as building blocks to the AfCFTA process, and this is very, very important as far as the relationships are concerned. In the same agreement, Article 19, I think, talks about the AfCFTA, being complementary to the integration process undertaken by RECs so far, and not in a way coming in to stifle their progress. So those are very fundamental legal provisions, and that is why I talk of a complex rather than a complicated relationship. Now, as a REC, we do directly participate or contribute to the development and the realization of the CFTA through two broad areas. The first one is that we do, together with the state parties to the agreement, participate in all ongoing negotiations in the different parts. So you are not left somewhere that negotiations are taking place and the RECs are not there. No, we are part and parcel of those negotiations, because these member states of the AfCFTA are also members, our own members, and who also have a lot of experience in terms of the establishment of RECs much more, earlier in the day. So that is important, and that is important because you may not know, but it is through that participation of the RECs together with the member states that the realization of the trading instruments for the AfCFTA took place very quickly, and that indeed the instruments that are being used within the CFTA were actually borrowed heavily from the tripartite. The tripartite agreement, that is the agreement consisting of COMESA, SADC, and EAC, which are also undertaking parallel negotiations in terms of harmonization and curing that multiplicity aspects that we are talking about. So that is very fundamental. So the rules of origin, the tariff commitments were largely from the tripartite agreement consisting of those three. And so in a large way, the participation of the RECs have been very relevant and very fundamental as far as integration in the CFTA is concerned. And secondly, the other framework is that of a collaboration between RECs and the CFTA Secretariat, as well as the private sector. And in this, I mean, there is a framework consisting of, or a task force consisting of heads of RECs, which has been established to also try and see how implementation can be facilitated, both from the RECs perspective as well as from the national as well as the continental level. And this I'm saying because the first meeting for the heads of RECs took place in September 2021, where in fact a draft action plan was adopted on how the RECs are going to facilitate implementation together with other stakeholders, including the private sector and also the member states themselves. So that framework is there. In fact, as we speak, the second meeting for the heads of RECs is planned for the 7th and 8th of June. So there are already things which are taking place addressing this issue of relationship. And speaking again, maybe directly to the presentation by Vito about the scenarios. So you realize for the three scenarios, I'm not sure any of this falls under those three. Maybe the closest is the one that you're talking of establishing or making the trade departments or divisions in RECs to implement. but it is also more than that. Rather than having the trade departments, it is the RECs themselves, because these programs and activities apparently overlap within various divisions in various RECs. So I think with that, there is always, that's why I was saying it's complex, it's doable, it's happening. I think what is required is much more focus, on what can the RECs, actively contribute given their experiences, and also given the vast number of membership into the continental body. Specific to COMESA, in fact, I think this is important to mention that we have programs and activities that stretch beyond our boundaries, trade facilitation programs to be specific, and which can actually be harnessed to be implemented beyond even at the continental level. And some of these include, for instance, we have a instrument like the customs transit guarantee scheme, which facilitates movement of goods or cargo across boundaries. It is operational beyond the COMESA member states. We have the yellow card scheme, which is for trucks, that can move across without having to buy national insurances. We have another one called we are implementing the simplified trade regime, which we adopted in 2015 upon realizing that it is not enough to reduce tariffs, because much of the trade that takes place between countries is by small-scale cross-border traders, and so they need a special regime that doesn't expose them to a lot of challenges when trying to access borders. So these are also some of the areas that I can talk about. Otherwise, I think from our side, some of the takeaways is to build on the process that are already taking place. I didn't mention the AUC process of division of labor, which my colleague mentioned and which is going on. So building on those initiatives that are taking place, but even most importantly is, and from the realization of and the experience of the RECs, it is one thing to sign and ratify these agreements, it's another to implement them at the national level. And so it would be good to place greater focus on assisting the member states to domesticate whatever agreements they sign at the RECs and also at the continental level. Thank you.
Thank you. I think you've already touched on it. There is already a dialogue going on about how to implement at the REC level, but not all RECs have sort of the same role within the AfCFTA. For example, the EAC was negotiating as an EAC, as a bloc, but for example in SADC it's slightly different, where the member states all are members to the AfCFTA as member states. So I wanted to turn to Alfred Nabeni from SADC and just ask about what does that mean for SADC, for example. How do you see your role as a secretariat within this framework of AfCFTA, and also how do you position yourselves without maybe having such a strong mandate as, for example, the EAC?
Well, thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody. I think as the previous speaker has said, the situation is complicated. And I understand what he means. It's so complicated, and all this complication is a result of multiple membership of individual member states to different RECs, more or less pursuing the same agenda, but from a different angle. Let me just give you the situation of the SADC. SADC is one of the most complicated REC. We have about possibly about 3 categories of membership within SADC. We have SACU countries. Well, SACU is a custom union, so we have that group of countries. And then we have another group like Tanzania. Tanzania is a member of SADC, but is also a member of the EAC. And we have another group of countries that belongs to different RECs. Zimbabwe, Malawi, Mauritius, you've mentioned them, they belong to COMESA, they belong to SADC. Now, what does this mean now in terms of moving forward with regard to any issues beyond the SADC? When the FTA negotiation, the CFTA negotiation started, as SADC, we were mandated by our ministers that we must assist our member states to participate in terms of advice and providing information here and there. And then what we did, we called a meeting of all member states so that we could understand each other on where do we start and where do we end. At the end of that meeting, it was realized that it is not possible for SADC Secretariat to have any role to play in the negotiations because of the issue of multiple membership of the memberships that are in SADC. COMESA is there, EAC is there, and SACU is there. So member states just agreed that no, there is no role that the SADC Secretary should play in the negotiations. It was agreed that the individual SADC member states are going to participate in the negotiation as individual member states. And as a result, SADC Secretariat was left with no role to play in the negotiation. Even when it comes to implementation, there is no way SADC Secretariat can assist the member states in trying to develop what we may call national implementation strategy or action plan. No way, because we are not there. And then when we attend the meeting just to listen to some discussion and to follow up. But there is no influence we make or coordinate even member states to meet and discuss, agree on a position on a specific issue. No way. So those are the complications that we have. That when you speak of rules of origin, we have SADC rules of origin, we have COMESA rules of origin, we have EAC of rules of origin, we have SACU rules of origin. How do you reconcile all this? It's not doable. So as a result, whether you speak of division of labor, yes, it's going to be division of labor on paper. But when it comes to implementing the division of labor, it's not something that is doable. Of course, we have known for years that, of course, this language of saying RECs being building blocks to the African Continental Free Trade Area. Yes, that is something that is on paper. But when it comes to the practicalities of implementing something like that, the AU has failed to deliver on that one. And it's because of the issue of multiple membership. Even when the negotiation started, we tried to come together here and there, but it has not worked out. And those are the challenges that we have and that we have been experiencing. That for us as SADC, we are in a very, very tight corner because of the issue of multiple. And it's not something new. They've tried for years and years. Some of us, when we started working, we got this issue, but it has no solution. And if I could just give you a simple example that a country like DRC is a member of SADC. As we speak now, in SADC, we have a free trade area. And DRC is not part of the free trade area of SADC. It's because of the issue of multiple membership. Just a month or two ago, DRC joined EAC, is a member of EAC. That is, an issue. EAC is a customs union. Now, how do you handle a situation like that one? So all these complications that we have outside the mandate of the Rex, it is a mess by individual member states, because the individual member states take decisions on where they want to go. And as secretariat, we don't have any means to control them. So those are the challenges that we have. And we'll never have all these issues sorted out until we are sure on how do we want to move forward. So I think that is all what I can say for now. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Alfred Nabeni from SADC, and also all the other speakers. I'm sure there would actually be a lot of room now for each of the panelists to also respond to the others. We just heard actually Mr. Nabeni saying that the AU didn't really deliver on the sort of cooperation or collaboration framework, if I understand it correctly. I think it will be interesting to hear also the response by the AU on that. But since we're a little bit behind in terms of time, and we promised to have at least a short break in order to keep you all awake, we decided to have a brief 5-minute break right now, coffee and bio break. And then go into the next session, which will be on private sector, but which will also allow us, I think, to take up some of the issues that came up now, and then also the last panel on sort of the summary and the conclusion and the role and the implications for international partners. So everything that was not being discussed right now, please keep your questions, keep your comments, both the audience and the panelists. And we won't forget you, and we will cover them later on, promised. So it is 3:24 on my watch now. So I would just say we are actually 3:22. So we will reconvene a little bit before 3:30 Nairobi time. That would be 2:30 German time. So in exactly 5 minutes. Thank you very much. All right, we will continue. Everyone from outside and here, please come back, take your coffee inside. And panelists, we have Mr. John Bosco Kalisa. You wanna move to the, you wanna get some. All right. In order not to lose more time, let us please start again, continue. Welcome back. Welcome back from the break. We hope you had a good coffee break or brought your coffee here. Yeah, we invite also the previous speakers back to the panel in case of any questions directed to you. We would invite you to respond directly. But as mentioned in the beginning, now the second subpanel will build on what we heard so far. So we have heard both a general overview about the relationship AfCFTA and REX from Vital from UNECA, UNECA. We heard the perspectives from 4 policymakers, from 2 RECs and from the 2 continental bodies, the AU Commission and the AfCFTA Secretariat. And the idea for this second subpanel now is to hear the view of the private sector, both the East African Business Council and also the SADC Business Council. So we have Mr. Peter van Del, the CEO of the SADC Business Council, who will join us virtual. And I hope we have him in the call. We will put him in spotlight in a minute. And then we have Mr. John Bosco Kalisa, the CEO of the EABC, the East African Business Council, joining us here in person in Nairobi. So I invite you all to give a round of applause, which I think we didn't do at the end of the last panel. So a round of applause to all the speakers and panelists. Thank you very much for joining us. And I would invite first Mr. Kalisa to share his view as a private sector representative on the issue of the complex relationship between the AfCFTA and the RECs, probably with particular focus on the EAC and how, from a private sector perspective, what kind of expectations you have to the different levels. Mr. Kalisa.
Thank you very much. Again, good afternoon, participants who are in this room and also those online. Yeah, this is a very interesting and exciting conversation in terms of the relationship. But where we stand, again, from the private sector, EABC, and from EAC, the structures are very clear. And I want to appreciate my brother here from COMESA. He attempted to give a clarification on the relationship. One, the African Union, its role is an oversight law. In an oversight law to see the implementation of continental free trade area. You know, even before the formation of the Secretariat, the coordination role was under African Union. So now the Secretariat, which is the CFTA Secretariat based in Accra, Ghana, its role is implementation of the agreement, the CFTA agreement. Then when it comes to REX, and Article 5 of the agreement is very clear. It sets out almost 11 principles. And I wanted to make it clear, maybe no one made it clear that different REX, I had my brother from SADC, it does recognize that we are at a different level of development. That is what we call variable geometry. And also the agreement sets the flexibility within it. Special flexibility within the agreement is under those 11 principles. The issue of information disclosure, engagement, transparency. So the agreement is clear. Know that even within REX, we are at different level. ESC is more integrated than other REX. Than 8 REX recognized. There are 8 REX recognized by African Union. And ESC has reached a customs union. Even SADC is at, but ESC is more deeper, has achieved more deeper integration. And I want to draw your attention to read the recent report by UNECA, African Union, in terms of the integration agenda in Africa. ESC is most integrated REX among other REX. So that's why ESC has decided to, as a region, submit their tariff offer as a region, as opposed to a single country tariff offer, because of its deepened level of integration. So even in our private sector engagement, I would say that I will be talking to my brother from SADC and COMESA Business Council. We want to move as a region, as a regional apex organization to implement the CFTA. We don't want to go as a single. We want to have a regional coordination mechanism. And I'm happy that while I'm speaking now, Africa Exim Bank is ready to support us, that we work as a regional apex organization to drive the implementation of the CFTA. So I'll be working closely with COMESA Business Council, SADC Business Council, ECOWAS Business Council, and their apex organization to internalize, drive, sensitize the private sector how to take the benefits of the CFTA, looking at the rules of origin, customs cooperation, technical barriers to trade, trade remedies. Those are annexed to the trade in goods. And also the trade in terms of trade in services, we are also looking at the schedules of commitment among countries. So the private sector, we don't want to go as an individual, we want to go as a coordinated bodies in terms of our engagement with our government, with our regional integration community. So I thought I wanted to really, again, as my brother from COMESA highlighted, when you look at the Article 19 of the CFTA agreement, it does recognize inconsistencies and conflicts. That is the heading, inconsistencies and conflicts that may emerge by not understanding or not taking into consideration the REX, the level of REX, the development of REX. And that is the principle they call the principle, a key principle, preservation of a key principle in the integration agenda. That is a very strong, I wanted to underline a key principle and variable geometry to highlight that countries, EU member states, they are the implementers. As ESC, we have like an ESC strategy for implementing CFTA, but in each country, it is the law of sovereign states also to domesticate that, so that it benefits their private sector, to benefits their institution. So that is the kind of the framework I wanted to highlight and share with you, that these are principles that we need to understand, internalize, as we endeavor to promote and benefit from the CFTA. The CFTA is a kind of a framework but it takes into consideration divergences and convergences among the RECs. Thank you.
Thank you very much for these valuable insights. I also wanted to now address Peter van Dam. Maybe just to confirm if you are in the call, maybe turn on your video if you're there.
I hope so, Danielle.
Okay, great. Good to see you. I wasn't sure if you're with us. Maybe just to add on from the SADC perspective, I mean, the SADC region is rather different from the EAC. It's a very large region with 16 member states, and it's also a very diverse region, and many businesses are still just trying to actually access the SADC market. So what's your take on the AfCFTA? Do you think is it too early, or does it even make sense for businesses to now access the AfCFTA market? And if yes, what do you think are the main challenges, and how do you think the private sector can sort of address or sort of tackle this larger market?
Yeah, thanks, Danielle. Can you hear me okay? Did freeze a little bit on our side, yeah? Just checking, you still okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Excellent, brilliant. Thanks so much. Thanks very much for including us and inviting us to join today. And you know, certainly from our side, this is an emerging area, something that we're learning about daily, and also, I guess, adapting daily to how we need to respond to it and include. I mean, obviously, it's a welcome initiative, and people see the value, but I guess our maturities are different in it. And as each day goes, we're starting to learn more. So just for your benefit, it was great to hear from Mr. Kalisa earlier from the East Africa Business Council. I think we still need to formally meet again on this topic, but I know our teams do meet from time to time to discuss this. So it's good to hear that there is a level of alignment between what you said earlier and what I'm about to share. For your benefit, the Business Council, SADC Business Council, is made up of the 16 national chambers of commerce and 6 sectoral business associations in Southern Africa. And I guess our key guiding document is the SADC Regional Indicative Strategic Development Plan 2020-2030, which envisages an improved economic and social development within the SADC region through accelerated industrial and technological developments, enhanced extra and intra-regional trade. The RSIDP recognizes that SADC is part of a wider continental and global community, and as such is one of the key building blocks of integration at the continental level. This makes it imperative to ensure that the SADC work program and activities are being implemented with a view to contributing towards the continental ideas espoused by the AU's Agenda 2063. Just in terms of our understanding, so the process of increasing SADC intra and SADC extra-regional and continental trade in goods and services will require a series of complex interventions aiming at strengthening member states and secretariats' capabilities to understand and positively influence the simultaneous processes of integration that are occurring at a SADC, FTA, tripartite, and continental levels. An assessment of the initial critical constraints that the SADC region faces towards implementation of the AfCFTA can be summarized as follows. Firstly, limited understanding regarding the status and key components of the AfCFTA by the SADC private sector. This includes understanding of opportunities and risks. There's been limited assessment at a SADC level of the benefits and costs of the tariff orders and rules of origin under the AfCFTA versus that offered under the SADC FTA. Sharing knowledge of this will assist in the ratification process and encourage implementation. The way member states perceive the benefits from SADC FTA will shape the way that they will see the AfCFTA integration. Hence, important technical diagnostic research and reviews are critical to guide member states and the private sector in decision making. Secondly, the lack of practical strategies on how the private sector can contribute towards reducing the high dependence on primary commodities in the exports and to improve product complementarity to benefit from the AfCFTA. This problem is particularly worse for least developed countries and some island developing countries, and it also affects small and medium enterprise businesses and the capacity to take advantage of the AfCFTA. The lack of technical and financial resources to follow up and understand and defend positively the domestic and regional trade interests. Limited financial support and capacity to take advantage of the provision of the AfCFTA, and lack of access to data to effectively participate in the remaining phases of the negotiations. This includes a limited coordination capacity to develop positions to negotiate as a region, included limited involvement of the private sector. And then finally, challenges of incorporating lessons under the SADC FTA in terms of implementation at a continental level. Several studies and documents have been pointing out challenges faced by SADC member states in consolidating the FTA. To start with, Angola, Comoros, and DRC are not yet participating in the SADC FTA. So our response to this is based on the premise that the success of the AfCFTA is based on execution and popularizing the commitments made. And this includes coordinating the private sector to agree on a common position to be fed into AfCFTA negotiations. Importantly, trade facilitation, and within this space, resolving non-tariff barriers, and then finally, developing regional infrastructure solutions and regional value chains. Similar to our colleague earlier, we strongly believe in the need for sensitization and understanding of the readiness of AfCFTA. And recently, together with the government of Malawi, UNECA, SRA, SA, the AU, we participated in a joint high-level multi-stakeholder conference on the AfCFTA in Malawi. The activity served as a pilot on engagement on the AfCFTA. In recognizing the success of this pilot engagement, we, together with the SADC Secretariat, wish to embark on an exercise to sensitize and update SADC member states in the private sector on the developments and opportunities provided by the AfCFTA. The objectives of this would be a series of country-specific public-private sector dialogues covering promoting an improved understanding of the AfCFTA, where the components are better explained, including their company annexes. This will involve, as an example, unpacking protocol and trade in goods, all their company annexes that include schedules of tariff, concession, rules of origin, customs cooperation, mutual administrative assistance, trade facilitation, non-tariff barriers, etc. Importantly, it will start to flag out opportunities and risks associated with the implementation of the AfCFTA across various sectors of the economy. It will aid identification of the mitigation measures to be used. To start to explore options on how the private sector can enhance its contribution towards success of the AfCFTA, and identify some of the key enablers and constraints, facilitate peer learning and exchanges on what other SADC states have done in preparation of the AfCFTA, but most importantly, to come up with a harmonized strategy of what SADC's approach is in terms of implementing the provisions of the AfCFTA in a way that it strengthens the region in terms of upscaling its productivity to take advantage of the AfCFTA. I think I'll just mention this briefly. I had a lot more detail on this, but just to note the importance of non-tariff barriers is something that we've identified, and obviously is one of the immediate areas of cooperation that we can work on. So again, just to acknowledge the support that we have from GIZ, from the German cooperation on this non-tariff barrier work that's ongoing on our side. We've done a number of policy papers around this and done a lot of good work around this. And I think as one of the key building blocks of the AfCFTA, I think it's important to acknowledge that we do need a system whereby private sector knows it can identify, raise, and have comfort that issues will be resolved through the non-tariff barrier mechanism. So I think just to note that we're doing a lot of work in the space that will both enhance the capacity of the public and private sectors in the identification and resolution of NTBs. And obviously the RECs become an important building block to the continental efforts in this regard. I'll attempt to summarize, and again, as our maturity grows, it's our understanding that the AfCFTA execution fundamentally is at a national level. And the SADC and Secretariat, SADC Business Council, have an important role to play in supporting alignment across the REC at a regional level, but then at the same time contributing to the alignment at a continental level via our own structures, be it the AU or the Africa Business Council. But in parallel, we see it as a critically important already to be working on the concept of promoting and driving the understanding and delivery of regional value chains, cross-border infrastructure, and very importantly, resolving non-tariff barriers. So that's our thoughts on this matter. As I say, it's maturing as we go, and look forward to learning from all the other colleagues on the call today. Thank you very much, Danielle. Back to you in Kenya, I think.
Thank you very much, Peter.
So, if you don't have a lot of general contractors, you can find a plumbing contractor.
There is some voice where we don't know where it's coming from, actually. So whoever is talking, please make sure to actually, I don't know, keep your device quiet or whatever that is. So thank you very much to both Peter and John Bosco. Now, we actually want to start also opening up the whole panel also for questions here from the audience in Nairobi and also in the call virtually. So whoever has a question, please in the chat, maybe either raise your hand or write them. Also here in Nairobi, think about your questions and please raise them. I would start up maybe with one question myself, and this is. So we now heard from you the role of the regional apex bodies, SADC and also the EABC. Moving certain tasks from the regional level to the continental level in the negotiations, we also see the establishment of continental private sector bodies like the African Business Council, the Pan-African Chamber of Commerce and Industry, for example. And I would like to know from you, Mr. Kalisa, also Peter, but also the other previous panelists, maybe from the public sector. Where do you see the role of such continental private sector bodies, and how would that relate also to the ones on the regional level? So would basically private sector engagement still work mostly on the regional level in order to feed it into the also continental negotiation process, or will eventually maybe some of that also be transformed to the continental level by sort of setting up and strengthening such continental bodies? I see Mr. John Bosco already having the mic in a sense, so we would start here, and then Peter and also any other panelists who want to respond to that question, please feel free to respond. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. A good question and a brilliant question in terms of our engagement at the continental level. Again, it brings to the same level. African Business Council is a very young and nascent organization. EABC has been in existence for 25 years. COMESA, I think the same period. The African Business Council is running from the regional private sector organization. We are the building block. African Business Council is there as a structure, but its relevance depends on the strengths of the regional private sector organization. So we do feed, and my brother knows that during the meeting around September in Accra, Ghana, we had to generate a position. COMESA, SADC, and EABC, we had a position, and that is the position that was used during the meeting of REX. Even now, we'll be holding a REX meeting in Arusha from 6 to 7. We are coming as the REC Business Association, and we feed into the continental one. And that's how it should be. Even EAC, that's why I'm saying the key principle is very clear. EAC is at a deeper integration level. It's more developed than CFTA. So CFTA need to learn. It generally picks some of the elements, including rules of origin. Some of the rules of origin that are being used at the EAC are the same as the replica that are being even used at the continental level. There are just a few divergences. But REX, CFTA is anchored on REX. The ability, the capability, and the delivery mechanism of CFTA depends on the REX. So whoever is providing support has to go to the REX to strengthen the CFTA. Even the Secretariat comes to learn from the REX. And I think that is the approach, and that is the sustainable approach among the CFTA and among the integration agenda. Learn from the best practice. And EAC is a role model in that, and that's why we are saying even EABC, our engagement with Africanism, they say you are mature, you've done this. Could you even we use you to support other business council? Can you coordinate? Can you drive that? So that is the spirit of engagement. It's not competition, but complementarity. Draw synergies, work together. That's what we are doing with COMESA and SADC. We are sharing experience. We are coming up with a joint position papers to feed the African Business Council.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Peter, maybe back to you. I see that the video is frozen. I hope that you're still here with us and you can hear us. Maybe the same question also to you as SADC Business Council. What is the SADC Business Council's relationship to these continental bodies that have been set up quite recently, as Mr. Gianbosco just said? And where do you see the relationship also for the future going?
Yeah, no, thanks. And, you know, again, good to see a level of alignment. So as it's quite correctly said, the Africa Business Council is a new organization, but it has a particular mandate and a particular role within the AfCFTA that is required. So, you know, we strongly support what its role is within its interaction with the AU and the AfCFTA. So we have contributed to advising and trying to guide what it should be playing versus what role the direct business councils will be playing. As correctly said by the East Africa Business Council, a big part of that has been engagements between the SADC Business Council, the East Africa Business Council, and the COMESA Business Council. We spent quite a bit of time in understanding amongst ourselves, you know, what was the role that we had to play versus that of the continental body. So I do think that there is this building block, and we all have our role to play. I think if you look specific to the SADC Business Council, it's our view that the Africa Business Council will only be strong if we are strong as a business council. So as a new kid in the block, I mean, we're not as old as the East Africa Business Council would be as an example. We strongly believe that we need to drive our agenda at a SADC level in order for us to be meaningful and to be able to support the Africa Business Council and what it seeks to do materially. So I think, like all things, these are building blocks. All of them, all sort of levels having their own specific and unique role to play, but the system together is what makes it all work. So, you know, hopefully it helps to some extent to understand what our position on this is. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Peter van Del. So we do hear that both directs will probably be there, I mean, for quite a while, and the same is true also for the relevant business council there. We don't expect either of them to disappear anytime soon. And if I understand correctly, the understanding on the private sector side is relatively similar to actually the public side, that the regional level will continue to exist and will actually inform what is happening on the continental level. And also nice to hear about complementarity rather than competition from Mr. Gianbosco. So again, if there are any questions right now to the panelists, maybe especially also on private sector, I'm happy to take that. I see one, which we will take then. And then we will actually move, I mean, as we mentioned in the end, we will have also a proper Q&A. But before that, we will still have the input by Trudy Hartzenberg from TRALAC, which will be a kind of summary of the whole discussion, and also some key takeaways and implications for partners, which then will also, I think, inform the Q&A we will do in the end. But we have one question here. If there are other pressing ones, we can also take them now before Trudy comes in.
Yeah, thank you very much for all of your interventions. I've become a bit curious. It's a question to the private sector. We will have sort of parallelism of different tariff concession regimes, of different free trade regimes. For instance, if I'm a Kenyan exporter and I want to export to Egypt, right? So I have the COMESA at my disposal. I have the tripartite at my disposal, and I will have the AfCFTA at my disposal. So in view of the private sector, is that useful from your point of view for your sort of intra-African trade or intra-regional trade? Is that something that you find efficient? How do you see that?
Thank you very much. And one second question we will combine.
Yeah, mine goes to the presenter from the public with relations to the complex structure, government structure from the different recs feeding into the AfCFTA. Now, the question is, as you meet in your different government meetings, is there really planned to align this kind of different complex structures so that at some point there is agreement moving forward to the AfCFTA? Because continuous conflictual membership and not, it can be multiple, but how do you structure yourself to agree on how to move forward? You can have, just like the relationship of multiple partners, you can have multiple partners, but you agree this is the direction we are going to move. Is everybody on board? And then say, yes, we are all on board. And the movement goes that way. So that is the kind of direction we would like to see from the public in order to see that these RECs solidarity is feeding into the AfCFTA. Is there any plan moving forward? Do you see alignment coming forward, any political will moving towards that direction? Then the last question to the business council communities for the SADC, COMESA, and the East African Business Council. We know the African market is huge and it is new, as it has been alluded to by most of the speakers. The question is, our private sector, who are predominantly SMEs, majority of them, they are not yet ready to tap into that market. Do we have strategy to really bring these people to speed? Much as they also at the REX level, they are not yet also still there. So how do we prepare to tap into these markets without retarding progress at the REX level? Thank you.
Thank you, Joyce. And then we have one final question for now for this round before we move then on to the responses and then further on to the last part of the session. Chimbembe.
Yeah, thank you. My question is to the SADC Secretariat. I just wanted an update on the SADC Simplified Trade Regime. I know women entrepreneurs have actually benefited from the COMESA trade regime, especially at the Mwami Nchinji border crossing between Malawi and Zambia, and also in the EAC. So I just wanted to know where we are on the SADC simplified trade regime and how best maybe the question maybe goes to the panelists, how best maybe we can scale it up to the AfCFTA continental level. Thank you.
Great, thanks to all the questioners. So we have one on the sort of the different preferences stemming from overlapping membership to the private sector. What does that mean for the private sector? We have one question on alignment among RECs and within RECs and the complex kind of structure of RECs. One for how to make sure that SMEs can also benefit from the AfCFTA. And then the final question to SADC on the simplified trade regime and how this can be scaled up. Let's start with the first one, maybe. I assume this goes to Mr. John Bosco again and also Peter. And then let's continue with the other ones following. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I think these are also good and a very interesting question. First of all, and I touched on that question. EAC had its own rules of origin, and I know even COMESA had its own rules of origin. And the rules of origin, we always say it is a passport for the good to move. It's like we have an EAC passport, or we're going to have an African Union passport. So goods will not move without the agreed rules of origin. That's the exercise that has delayed the implementation of the CFTA. It's harmonization of the rules of origin, the REX rules of origin and continental rules of origin. So currently, I would say that we have achieved almost 87.7% for those goods that are are not under the category of sensitive goods or the exclusion goods. Like ESA, you know, our tariff offer has, we've submitted tariff offer of around 90.2%, and the requirement is 90. So basically, if the continental rules of origin are 87.7, we're almost aligned. So you will use one single rules of origin to trade from Kenya to Egypt. You will not use different rules of origin. So that is the commonality, that is the nomenclature, that's what has been agreed, that we are going to use CFTA rules of origin, not different rules of origin by the RECs. That is the harmonization exercise that has been happening. The same for standards. We'll have a harmonized standards for the goods. Those that we add value, and those that are substantially, or those are wholly produced goods, like agricultural goods. So those are things that have been discussed in the negotiation and they have been resolved. So I think with the rules of origin, we at a good level, at a positive step in terms of harmonizing and aligning our regional integration rules of origin vis-a-vis the continental rules of origin. So the goods with the marked CFTA will move across the continent without using different rules of origin. So that's my response to you. Do you want also to respond to, or maybe?
Yeah, maybe first the others, and then we see, because we also have to keep an eye on the time so that we don't run over. Peter, over to you. From the perspective of any SADC business in a country that also has overlapping membership, what is the perspective on these issues for deciding then to trade under all these different existing regimes?
No, look, I think there's some level of confusion. So, you know, I think I'm not necessarily a trade expert per se, but I think all the comments that we get from our members and from our colleagues is they just need to have a level of understanding, a better level of understanding of what's going to rule. So until such time as there's better understanding of how the free trade areas side of things will work, I think they'll continue to trade under existing rules. So I think that transparency, that understanding, that maturity is something that's still coming from our side.
Thank you. Then there was the other question on specifically to COMESA on the complexity, and will there be any change and maybe any attempt to solve the complexity in the near or middle term future?
Yeah, it's on now. Yeah. So thank you for that question, and I think my brother here has helped me answer part of that question. So there are efforts on a daily basis. That is what happens in ongoing negotiations that you hear about. So in terms of minimizing, you know, those divergences created by multiplicity of membership. So as I mentioned, within the tripartite configuration, which constitutes COMESA, SADC, and EAC, those are the negotiations that are ongoing to try to harmonize. And it would be much easier, you know, once the three RECs harmonize, to take them, you know, to the continental level, so that at the continental level, you don't spend much time between member states negotiating on the same rules. So those efforts are there. Those are the challenges that we continue to face, because again, even at the regional level, you know, it's member states who are engaged, and they must make commitments, you know, to, you know, rationalize those existing rules and regulations at the national level, be able to conform to the regional level. But yeah, I wanted to, since part of my question had been answered, I wanted to take advantage and just contribute a point or two in terms of the role of private sector, if you allow.
If you could maybe keep it to 2 minutes, is that,
yes,
is that
yes,
possible?
Yes,
okay,
exactly.
Great.
As I mentioned, we are moving together with the private sector in terms of the collaborative framework that I spoke about. Now, there are two areas which maybe need to be broken down in terms of the roles of the private sector. In my view, it should not just be, you know, participating in those meetings, but I have like two ideas. One of it is you see, one of the challenges that exist is in terms of domestication of these laws and rules at the national level. And the private sector through the associations. I know there are governments which have strong private sector associations which engage their national governments and even parliaments, even on a quarterly basis, to try to improve the business environment through making necessary legislations. I think the private sector have a lot of room to try to hasten that as part of its contribution towards the domestication process. It should not be left to just the national governments, but to the negotiators or the RECs alone. But you have the power and the strength to be able to lobby national, parliaments to focus more on business-related, regulations at national level, and that would be a very good, step. The other one is in terms of the reality is the member states' contribution to RECs supports only the recurrent expenditures. So, and many of the member states are poor, so there are always a lot of challenges. And perhaps it's also time that the private sector, through those decisions, can be able to identify, certain programs which may help, in sensitization and all that. In other words, helping RECs to support domestication and sensitization at national level, and not leaving it to the national governments, because they have their own challenges. And as RECs, we can say if it was not for donors, then many of these programs and activities that we are talking about would not take root. So again, as a special, call again through those associations, you can be able to play some special role in terms of supporting some of the programs, particularly those that you feel maybe hinder your advancements in the region. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So if I understand correctly, also a call to the private sector, not only to be engaged in the negotiations, but also play an active role in implementing and sort of sharing its resources. So I would hand over to Alfred on the question about the SADC simplified trade regime. And if you allow me, I would just use my role as a moderator to actually maybe push the second question by Joyce. We don't forget it, but the question on involvement of MSMEs, I assume this is also a bit connected already to the role of partners, because some of that touches on partners. So maybe we can address that actually after the final also on the role of partners. But with that, over to Alfred. The question was the status of the simplified trade regime in SADC and how this can also be scaled up to the continental level in the CFTA context.
Thank you very much, dear moderator. Yes, we have an approved SADC simplified trade regime framework, which of course is being implemented based on a voluntary and a bilateral arrangement by member states. So if two member states wants to implement such a simplified trade regime, they will go into bilateral arrangement and they agree. At this stage, the pace towards that bilateral, engagement has been a bit slow. In fact, because this regime was just approved last year, and we have not yet received any request from member states that they want to go into bilateral negotiation in order to implement the simplified trade regime. But of course, the instrument is in place, and all what we are waiting for is someone to indicate that we want to go into this arrangement and try to facilitate such an engagement between the interests of the SADC member states. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alfred, for sharing the current status of the STR with us. And I think as a sort of final stage of our session today, I would now like to call on Trudy Hartzenberg from TRALAC to sort of share with us your wisdom and guide us a little bit on What are sort of the key takeaways from today's session? We've heard a lot of different inputs from the private sector, from the public sector, also from UNECA, and I think a lot of good perspectives, but maybe also some varying perspectives. So I would like to ask you to maybe briefly summarize for us the key takeaways, but also to provide some guidance on what does that mean for us as GIZ, because as you know, we have programs in all the RECs, we have programs that support the private sector, we have an AfCFTA program that is also growing. So we just want to hear from you a little bit, since you've been in this sphere for a long time and you have a bit of an external perspective, what is your guidance for us?
Thank you so much, Danielle. And I have to just mention a little bit of a caveat. No wisdom from my side, just some thoughts after listening to an extremely important conversation. I think the timing is very right to have this conversation about what is essentially a coexistence model between the AfCFTA and the regional economic communities. Of course, we've listened quite carefully to the longer term trajectory of what this coexistence model might become at some stage. But for now, and I would say for the foreseeable future, we can envisage that the regional economic communities will continue to exist alongside the AfCFTA. After all, the RECs exist in terms of their own legal instruments. And keep in mind that regional integration is member state driven. So member states decide, as Alfred has reminded us, they will decide on which RECs to belong to join and which integration paths are most appropriate for their national development strategies. The role of the private sector in this coexistence model, I think, is becoming increasingly important. And it's important for a whole range of reasons. Fundamentally, we know it's the private sector that will invest, that produces, trades, and innovates, takes risks, and drives the integration process. So the role of the private sector is absolutely critical in addressing the fundamental challenges that we face on the continent. And I think this is perhaps something that we need to have a look at a little bit more carefully. When we say absolutely correctly that multiple membership is a problem, what exactly is the problem? After all, it's possible for a sovereign state to belong to multiple free trade areas. But what is the problem with our multiple membership? And our colleagues from the private sector have touched on some of the issues. They come back to, for example, multiple rules of origin regimes. Colleagues, that means you're fragmenting production at the firm level, at the production floor level, to supply different markets. It increases transaction costs and circumscribes competitiveness in terms of sourcing inputs to be able to meet the rules of origin for different export markets. Standards, different standards across the continent, across regional economic communities, and potentially also in the AfCFTA. The non-tariff barriers, trade facilitation. Colleagues, I'm not telling you anything new. We know all of these issues, but we need to come down to that granular level if we are going to be addressing the issues that fundamentally impact on Africa's capacity to produce tradable goods and services competitively, and the deficits that we face in terms of the lack of diversity and the broader lack of industrial capacity, agricultural capacity in our services sectors. So those, I think, are important issues to keep in mind. All of the RECs, colleagues, offer best practice in different areas. And I think we need to recognize this. We sometimes say this REC is more advanced than another. Yes, in certain respects, but every REC, and not only the 8 recognized by the African Union, all of the trading arrangements and regional integration arrangements on the continent have best practice from which we can learn. I think we need to take that very seriously. What about the AfCFTA? The AfCFTA explicitly recognizes the existence of the RECs, and the REC FTAs are designated as the building blocks of the AfCFTA. So we are recognizing that they will coexist, and there are certain rules that are already apparent in terms of how they will coexist. I think when we take a look at the emerging AfCFTA agenda, but also, colleagues, keep in mind that the REC integration agendas are developing. So if we take a look at the recent developments, I think Alfred, you reminded us that the DRC recently acceded to the EAC. This is a huge step with complex implications. SADC, the Protocol on Trade and Services, entered into force not so long ago. Within ECOWAS, within COMESA, within so many of the RECs, there are important developments that we've got to recognize and factor into this broader equation. But the AfCFTA is enjoying so much focus, support, and interest, and is pushing the boundaries in a number of areas. If we take a look at what's happened in recent years, for example, we've seen that the AfCFTA now not only will have a protocol on e-commerce, it'll be a protocol on digital trade. That is appropriate and necessary. We're looking at gender and youth on that agenda, but there are still gaps. And some of the most important gaps include climate or the environment. Colleagues, that's perhaps the existential challenge for all of us on this continent. And we need to be factoring that into our trade agreements, into our regional integration arrangements. And I think that's really, really important. So how can we find convergence between the REC and the AfCFTA agendas in areas where it is possible to cooperate and hopefully also fairly soon move towards harmonization, because that ultimately is going to be important. The future of trade governance is about regulation, whether it be standards, whether it be services sector regulation, it is about regulation. And these areas are open for convergence among the RECs and the AfCFTA levels. One of the very, very difficult issues that remain is the traditional trade and goods issue, and one of the basic requirements of a free trade area, and that's the rules of origin. And here we really, really are finding ourselves in a tight corner, because the rules of origin are used not for their primary purpose of preventing trade deflection, but also to protect our domestic markets from import competition. It's not an efficient instrument to protect our domestic markets, but in the process, we are really imposing enormous costs on the private sector, and in particular on the small, medium, and micro enterprises. That said, the developments around a simplified trade regime are extremely important. It's a pity that SADC at this stage is looking at bilateral relationships within the SADC configuration. We can do better than that. If we really are hoping to mobilize intra-Africa trade in those small consignments for the small traders, those traders who are so close to the development outcomes that we want to promote, then we should be looking not only at a REC level, but at a continental level arrangement as far as a simplified trade regime is concerned. Colleagues, the issues around transparency and access to information that some colleagues have mentioned, I think are extremely important. And this is where the roles of the REC secretariats, the African Union Commission, the AfCFTA Secretariat are really, really important. Transparency is such a key ingredient for improving rules-based governance, but also improving access to opportunities. If we don't know what the opportunities are, there are many, many transactions that are not taking place that could well be adding value to the integration arrangements that we're looking at. So I think from where I'm sitting at the moment, I think we've got to recognize that our integration plan as a continent has multiple layers. We are all at different stages of development, and integrating unequal partners, those member states at very, very different levels of development, is a long-term commitment. And this is a strong message for our development partners. Don't give up on the RECs. Don't give up on the member states. Don't give up on the AUC or on the AfCFTA Secretariat. We need help at all levels. But it's so important that we ask the appropriate questions from the appropriate corners. In other words, where we can find the answers to the real issues. The fact that if we take a look at our regional economic communities, most are still work in progress. So even in the EAC, colleagues, in ECOWAS, in SADC, if we look at the customs union in the EAC, there are still arrangements, stays of application and so on, which means that we are not a fully fledged, fully implemented customs union yet. The same applies in ECOWAS. And if we look at the FDA and SADC, my goodness, we haven't come close to eliminating all the non-tariff barriers, which we should eliminate in an FDA. So we're all still on the road towards the objective of deepening our integration, of full implementation. At the end of the day, it's so important that we think about those who are making decisions to invest, to supply services, to engage in cross-border economic activities, but also as consumers, to buy goods, to source goods, to engage in all kinds of new economic opportunities that hopefully the AfCFTA will also open up for us. So improving the business environment. And the business environment is not only for the large-scale businesses, but it is absolutely critical that we think about small investors. The small investor who comes across a border and opens up a micro lending business or buys a laptop and starts coding and employs another coder, that's investment. It may only be $2,000 or something to that equivalent, but it's cross-border investment. And that kind of opportunity can also, of course, be multiplied through digital opportunities, so through the digital economy development. To be honest, as soon as you have a website or a presence on social media and you're advertising goods or services, you are open for international trade. And so bringing those opportunities closer, particularly through social enterprises, supporting those small-scale individuals, the youth in particular, who may find it very, very difficult to find a job, to be employed as a worker in an enterprise, but the opportunities to actually generate their own enterprise are really important for them. So I think these are just some thoughts. It's been a really interesting discussion. I want to thank everybody. I've enjoyed it enormously and I've learned a lot. Thank you so, so much.
Thank you, Trudy, very much for your sort of summary and also for the encouragement that even though this relationship, it may be complicated, it is definitely not impossible. I think you've very well captured sort of the key points that were discussed today. And what I also took from your remarks is that we should really focus on specific topics, be it trade facilitation, be it non-tariff barriers, be it trade and services, and really try and find some convergence in those areas. And I think that's very much aligned with also what we do as GIZ, because we do tend to work on those specific topics of trade facilitation and beyond. And I also quite liked your idea of basically not one size fits all, and we are all at different stages. Each REC is at a different point. Each REC has its own sort of unique uniqueness. And I think that's also very much in line with the way we work, because we do still work at the REC level. And I think that also sort of reinforces that it is important to work at the REC level and to continue our support, not only to the AfCFTA, but also continue to support in the regions. So maybe with this, I will open the floor once again for questions to any of the speakers, of the panelists.
And maybe just to mention, I mean, you probably noticed that we're right now, I think, at the official end of our session. But if there is hopefully still some interest in discussing further, we hope that it's fine if we run over maybe 15 minutes or so, just in order to really be able to continue discussing and not having to end it here. So either any questions from the audience or from the chat. I didn't see anything on the chat. Also keep in mind, we still have the question from Joyce on actually support to MSMEs. So maybe you want to respond to that first, or? Okay, so let's do that. And then we have another question here in the back.
Yeah, I wanted to respond to the question raised by Joyce, and I want to really appreciate a friend from TRORAC who has summarized our discussion and bringing it to the context. And that is the spirit of the integration. Again, the spirit of we recognize the divergence approach, but we converge somewhere. That is the spirit. So the question on the SMEs, that is a very, very important. Again, it is just to share experience what we are doing as the East African Business Council. We see the CFTA as an opportunity, despite the challenges, but we see it as an opportunity. And we have had a support from various donors, GIZ, Trademark, UNECA. So what we did, we undertook a survey to our members, both corporates, medium enterprises, small enterprises, and informal, to gauge their understanding about CFTA. And we realized that the level of understanding was very low. So we took it upon ourselves to sensitize our member to understand these instruments, these trade instruments, rules of origin, standards and SPS measures, trade remedies, technical barriers, trade facilitation measures. So we've been doing that across all the segments of our business. So recently, we've through the support from International Trade Center, we've developed a portal, an SME portal, and under my SME portal, we call it my Isoko. Isoko in East Africa is a market. So under that market, we are trying to see, these are the opportunities under EAC, but this is also an opportunity under CFTA. So, and also under that portal, we've put a window in terms of how you can identify an NTB and how you can report it. So it is a very an interactive portal. And I think that is the way we are doing it in terms of sensitization, in terms of reaching to those segment of business that are not, sometimes don't have that luxury of getting the important information related to trade. So that is what we are doing as EABC, and we've created an SME portal and SME platform, bring youth and women. We have a desk under my office responsible for youth in business and women in business. So we are generally all the time taking a proactive role in sensitizing them, bring them on board. What are these issues? And we always have webinars where they are showcasing the innovation, their business, their engagement. So that's what we are doing at the EAC and at the EABC level. Again, I want to say that our relationship between the EABC and the EAC Secretariat is very cordial, because we have a technical working group. We meet every month, and we dialogue on most of these issues, including the tariff offer, including rules of origin. Like next week, I have a webinar on 2nd on trade finance. That has been one of the challenges for SMEs: access to finance, trade finance, and the cost of finance is one of the challenges. So I wanted just to respond to my brother about simplified trade regime. Generally, my vice chair, during the meeting in Ghana, he raised it. This has been one of the instruments that has enabled the micro and small enterprises to benefit from the trade agreements, from regional integration. It was initiated by COMESA. Generally, it's the COMESA product, instrument, and the EAC adopted it. So those goods that are less than 2,000 US dollars are exempted from taxes. You can trade across border with those goods. There is a threshold. And I've seen that generally recently, the West Africa ECOWAS team came to learn from the EAC. And that has enabled SMEs to appreciate the beauty, the instruments that we have around the EAC, how they can trade across borders, and currently even using their IDs, the use of IDs. I know one of the borders like between Rwanda and every day, generally it has been even automated. The ID is automated. Every day, the SMEs, they cross about 50,000 SMEs every day. You use your ID to cross, you trade, you go back without any challenge. That is what is happening in most of our borders, Busia, Maraba, and others. You use your ID, and you use the simplified trade regime to trade. So it is an instrument we've been encouraging the Secretariat, the CFTA, to adopt and infuse within the trade protocol. And I think their plan is to integrate it. And again, it is a very useful trade instrument, especially to graduate those micro and formal into the formal structure. I want to end by also echo to what my sister from Trarak is mentioning. Trade information is very critical. Transparency is very critical. And trust within the business community is very critical. And that is the currency we have, the unique currency that we need to build trust through disclosure, through transparency, through accountability, through trust. That kind of social cohesion is very important to build our business ecosystem. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kalisa, and thanks also for even including in your response examples that go a little bit beyond the EAC and sort of highlighting also how different regions can learn from each other with ECOWAS and EAC. We have another question here from the colleague from Kenya. You can also introduce yourself briefly and please raise your question.
Thank you very much. My name is Abel Kamau from Kenya Association of Manufacturers. Much appreciation to the panelists for the engaging discussions and presentations. So I do have two questions, with one being a comment. The first one being to the RECs, the regional economic blocks. What is the feasibility of having conversations and engagements for bilaterals between the regional economic blocks, specifically for reduction of the tariff barriers to trade within the RECs? I know some of the, at least we do have some customs unions within AfCFTA, and one of the challenges is that some of the highest bands within these regional economic blocks, they are not uniform. For instance, you find one REC having 30 maybe as the highest band, another REC having as high as maybe 40 something. And as such, maybe in the gradual phase down, what is the feasibility of having maybe bilaterals between the RECs to ensure that at least we do accelerate the reduction of the tariff barriers to trade? Then secondly, I know some of the RECs have been undergoing, specifically the custom unions. They've been having CET reviews. Specifically, I think the EAC and the ECOWAS towards the West are already migrating into HS 2022. But we know some of the tariff offers under AfCFTA were made under the former HS. So how do we maybe possibly transition into the new HS 2022? And how could we maybe possibly have this as a discussion area in the forthcoming meetings between the RECs? Then lastly, just to underscore maybe the presentation made and the comments made by Tralak, I think one of the major challenges we've had is the use of certain trade policy instruments to address maybe supply and demand side challenges within the individual countries. And I think you referred to maybe the protectionist measures maybe which are put forward. And as such, maybe just allowed GIZ for these specific consultations and workshops with the stakeholders, and hoping that these can be scaled up maybe to the rest of the African countries, specifically to the negotiators, and at least sensitize them on the various areas around trade policy instruments, for them to at least acknowledge that we can't be using some of these trade policy instruments to address some of the pertinent challenges that are within maybe our countries and our industrialization sectors. So thank you.
Thank you. Maybe Kommissar wants to start responding.
Okay, thank you very much, Abel, for those questions. The first question you are asking about feasibility of rationalizing or harmonizing the tariff bands. I want to believe we are between maybe EAC and the others, if there is that feasibility. And I'm always positive in a way. I think nothing is impossible. What happens is we try to learn from each other and adopt each other's instruments wherever they are working. So I can attest to the fact that it is possible, not just within the RECs that are within the East and Southern Africa region, but continentally, so long as there is goodwill, political goodwill from the memberships or members of these organizations. And as I said, we always build on what is there. So given EAC is the deepest, has the deepest level of integration, I think it's possible to have, not that it's possible, but it's possible to rationalize this across other RECs, which are also aspiring to be a customs union. With regard to the second question on use of the application of the HS 2022, I think as COMESA we are engaged in the process of engaging member states to undertake that. We have committed a consultant with the assistance of UNCTAD to help in that process. So we will be doing that, engaging our member states in converting to HS 2022. And there are many things that are ongoing because there are a lot of changes that are taking place, not just even within the rules of origin and standards and all that. New products are being produced, so it requires a continuous engagement in reviewing the instruments that we have in place. Yeah, thank you.
I think he has that is also the same approach we are taking at the EAC level in terms of rationalization and reviewing these trade promotion, trade development instruments. Recently, the common external tariff, we did review and we moved from a 3-band structure to a 4th band structure to protect those infant industries in our region. So I think also the rules of origin is under review, the same for the HS code. So this is an ongoing activity. Again, the integration process is a gradual process. It's a progressive process. You can't immediately move from one stage to another. And it is also a learning process. Let's appreciate it. It's a learning process. Integration is about learning from each other. One of the colleagues was saying even the EU has not perfected its integration agenda. It has been the longest integration grouping. They are still learning from each other. So the same EAC, the same COMESA, SADC, and others, we continue to learn, we continue to improve. But for the benefit, our belief is that trade and market matters than these artificial borders. So the prosperity we envisage will come from trade and markets, how we deepen our trade engagement, how we open up our market opportunities. That's our belief, that's our commitment, and that is our aspiration in terms of growing prosperity through trade and markets.
Thank you very much. Maybe we would first hand over to Albert from SADC to also hear the SADC perspective. And then actually, unfortunately, we have to wrap up. I feel that we're running a bit low on oxygen here in the room. And also, at least Danielle and myself were actually even engaged in the plenary, which is starting in 10 minutes. So we have to also then move to the other room. So I would invite Albert to share the SADC perspective. And then, unfortunately, I think afterwards we have to wrap up the session and close. Albert, over to you. You see, it's getting too late, maybe. That you're unmuted, but we can't hear you yet.
Sorry, are you referring to Albert or Alfred?
Very sorry for that. That was just my mistake. I am referring to you, Alfred Nabi.
I thought there was someone by the name of Albert. That's why I didn't say anything. Chair, I think my colleagues who have spoken said it all. I think we might be coming from different angles, from different perspectives, but all what we are aiming for is how do we meet at a common point in one way or the other, so that at the end of the day, we have one tariff, we have one rules of origin, we have a common custom-related documentation. And I think for some of you who have been following the trends in our region, is that we have a program that we have not yet finalized, the tripartite FTA negotiation. That is exactly what we are trying to do. How all the RECs, rules of origin, custom-related documentation, tariff can come together and have one. And that's exactly what we are trying to address through that type of program, tripartite FTA. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. So then I think this means that I will just be able to say a very, very warm thank you to all the panelists, both here in Nairobi and also those joining us virtually from all across the continent. So please, a big round of applause to all the panelists. Thank you very much. And I feel that we could have continued this discussion, I'm sure, until the evening and probably much longer. Unfortunately, there's definitely a lot of issues that we were not able to fully address. But I'm actually optimistic, given that also us as GIZ, we work on all these different levels. We work with most of the RECs, we work with the AU, with the AfCFTA Secretariat, with different partners on exactly these kind of issues that we spoke about today. So I think that the discussion today was only not a starting point, but it was one step maybe in a long conversation that we will continue to have. And so all the questions that were not answered today, we will take up in future forums, maybe still today for those of you who are in Nairobi, maybe over a glass of wine in the evening, and then also in the future in all kind of other exchanges. So thank you very much for joining us. Thanks very much for all your contributions and questions. And I wish you all the best for the rest of the conference. Thank you.